Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Just an upset alert. There's an article up on boxingscene.com commenting on a fight that I commented on earlier. Freddie Roach, Manny Pacquiao's trainer, has given an interview where he said that the fighter he wanted Pacquiao to fight was Terence Crawford. Right? He thought that there was no way Crawford could beat Manny Pacquiao. Two things. First, earlier here online, I gave that same opinion. Right? I think Crawford, as great as he is, might not have the ability to deal with Manny Pacquiao's hand speed. I think Pacquiao has a suddenness that would catch Crawford off guard. More importantly, and I think this is very important, it sounds like Freddie Roach wasn't enthusiastic about the idea of a Manny Pacquiao-Timothy Bradley third fight. Keep in mind, Freddie Roach was in Pacquiao's corner for the first two. If Timothy Bradley was an easy mark, right, Pacquiao certainly knows Bradley better than he knows Terence Crawford, who he's never faced, then it is very telling that Freddie Roach would have been happier with his fighter taking on Terence Crawford rather than the third fight with Timothy Bradley. Right? From where I sit, Bradley is a very live underdog in that fight. Right? Just know Bradley was not Freddie Roach's first choice. Let's talk about the WBA Super Middleweight Championship bout, the rematch between champion Fedor Chudinov and Felix Sturm. Right? These two guys fought to a split decision last year. Now here, I'm going to go with the favorite. Fedor Chudinov is the 3-1 favorite. I actually feel that this guy is smarter and better than advertised. Don't go by the narrative here online, right, of him being, younger and able to, be more athletic than Felix Sturm. What I want people to do is to actually look at the fight. I've placed it in my favorites here on YouTube. That first fight is not what you think it would be. Right? The older fighter in his mid-30s, Felix Sturm, is actually the guy on his front foot. He's the guy trying to hunt down Chudinov. Right? It's a bit amazing. And believe it or not, it's the supposed younger slugger who's on his back foot, trying to maintain a cushion between the two fighters. Right? He's the guy who's keeping it mid-range. Now let me say this. A couple of things will leap out at you. Felix Sturm has one of boxing's better jabs. But Chudinov can actually jab with Felix Sturm. In other words, you're watching a guy who's supposed to be a slugger and suddenly you're seeing a skill set. Right? By the way, the slugger guy, Chudinov, actually has the faster hand speed, is actually not going all out to get a KO. Quite the opposite. He's actually there boxing, dare I say outboxing, Felix Sturm. Right? You start to realize too that he's not a one-punch slugger. Forget what you heard about Fedor Chudinov. Forget many of these articles here online. He's not a one-punch slugger. This guy's actually a combination puncher. So here you are looking for, at least I was, looking for a slugger. You know the type I'm talking about. A guy coming in, he's winding up, he's not even looking at you, he's throwing big shots. And instead what I got was a chess player. Right? Understand, Chudinov is setting up shots. Right? He's actually countering Sturm off Sturm's jab. Right? He's even more on his toes than I expected. He actually shows a lot of lateral movement. Let me say this too. While he's a little bit shorter than Felix Sturm, that actually helps him because he stands upright. Sturm's the one bent over. Right? So even though Chudinov doesn't really bend at the waist to hide his body, right? He's able to somewhat protect his body because he's the shorter fighter. Let me say this too. Chudinov is supposed to be offensively blessed. Let me just tell you, he has above average defense. As Felix Sturm tries to throw, shots up top, you'll actually notice that the supposed offensive slugger, Chudinov, has his hands up, is blocking the shots. More importantly, he's not overwhelmed. Right? Keep in mind, he's fighting that first fight in Felix Sturm's backyard, as he will be fighting the second fight. Both fights, are taking place in Germany. But he's fighting in Felix Sturm's backyard. Felix Sturm is flashing a jab. And what you're going to notice, I want you to just look at Chudinov's eyes. Rather than be one of these guys who's looking away and closing his eyes and covering up and dealing with the jab. No, this guy is always looking at Felix Sturm, right? He's calm. He has the right temperament. He has his hands up, he's blocking shots, and he's looking at Felix Sturm. And he is throwing counters. Let me point out, too, you know how some fighters get excited by their work. They throw a punch, it's hard, it hurts the other guy, right? Then that fighter suddenly jumps in and empties the tank. Then, of course, there's still 20 seconds left in the round and the guy has an empty tank, right? Think Saul Alvarez, right? Here, it's interesting because Chudinov, who's in his 20s, really is a very mature fighter. In other words, he's not one to really admire his work. What he does is he hits you with hard shots, and if he feels it's early in the fight and that those shots aren't going to take you out, he'll leave the pocket after hitting you with hard shots. In other words, this guy isn't in a rush. Right? Let me point out, too, I'm really impressed by how the guy was in third gear. Right? You're looking at him and you're like, wow, this guy seems to be coasting here. Then, of course, we get to the later rounds and suddenly the guy kicks in a fourth gear. You actually realize that this guy's been pacing himself. He's been holding himself back a little bit. Right? As you see him throw combinations and flash hand speed, understand, he's not overexerting himself. This guy is a 3-1 favorite for a reason. Right? It's not every day that I would pick a fighter against Felix Sturm in Germany. Right? But that's what I'm doing here. Right? Revisit the scoring on the first fight. You're going to notice that one judge actually had Chudinov winning by 8 rounds. Another judge had him winning by 4 rounds. The judge that went for Felix Sturm had Felix Sturm winning the fight by 4 rounds. Even though that first fight was a split decision, in my opinion, Chudinov clearly wins that first fight. Don't go by the official decision. Right? So, let me say, Felix Sturm went the distance the first time, right? Actually had some moments late in that fight. Felix Sturm is still a robust fighter in his mid-30s. I think he's 36 years old, right? He's still robust. But he's at that stage in his career where he cannot hang with the hand speed of alleged slugger Fedor Chudinov. Right? Also understand, Chudinov, much older than his years. you're going to notice that early in the fight, he tries to bank body shots, right? This guy is not in there just fighting, trying to land hard shots. He's actually picking his spots, right? This guy is a revelation. Don't get me wrong. At 168, I believe there's only one real king, and his name's James DeGale. But I'll say this, Fedor Chudinov, who is unbeaten, who beat Felix Sturm in something like his 13th fight, in my opinion, is a guy to keep his eye on. I suspect that DeGale is having a problem making weight at 168. There's going to be a time where DeGale has to abdicate his throne. You're hearing a lot of other names at 168, right? You're hearing guys like Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.'s name bandied about, right? I'm just telling you, this guy Fedor Chudinov is very impressive. As you watch him, don't sit around expecting big punches, right? He's not that guy. Who he is a guy who's actually a chess player who throws combinations, who's actually reading an opponent, who can hang in the pocket and counter Felix Sturm's jab, right? Who isn't intimidated by fighting on the road, right? His last fight was against a British fighter in Wembley, right? So I'm taking the favorite, the reigning champion, the 3-1 favorite, Fedor Chudinov here. I think he beats Felix Sturm in the rematch. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Thanks for stopping by.